Haven't done one of these kind of around the hobby style videos in a little while, mostly because it really hasn't been warranted. There's been the odd story here or there where I'll touch on it here, and then obviously anything that kind of gets as a catch-all, I usually put it on the live stream. This one really doesn't qualify either, to be honest, but there were a couple of pieces, a couple of videos, and a couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring to the forefront. So anything that I mention on here, I'll include links to it in the description for you. Like I said, things have been very quiet from a general news statement. I know that a PSA came out with their announcement, quote unquote, that they had opened up economy service at the $50 level to everybody, which obviously for a lot of folks kind of falls flat of what they were hoping for. But I do think it's a step basically in the direction of probably getting the next tier down in terms of being through the lottery system. So getting the $50 one off the lottery system is a step towards that. But ideally, of course, you want to link the two. You want to have it, the lottery system get dropped and then it gets reduced to the lower level. So we'll have to kind of see what happens with that one. I'd expect probably that one down the road here, but timing wise, it hasn't happened yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple of these tabs here, and I'm going to bring a couple of things to your attention that might be interesting for two different reasons, and I'll share them with you. And again, I'll put the links to that in the description. So we'll do two videos, and then we'll do something from Net54 that I just thought was kind of interesting. It's a little bit of kind of a fun thing on the side. So first one, this one's from Neo Cards and Comics. He did an interview that dropped earlier today with Peter Steinberg of SGC. So the CEO, I formerly president for a while, but now the CEO of SGC, and they spent almost 90 minutes talking. So it's actually pretty good. I will say, those of you who are familiar with a lot of Peter's stuff in terms of interviews and discussions, he's very enthusiastic and he's well spoken, and he's done a very good job promoting SGC, especially being very forthcoming about a lot of the shortcomings they had early on when they initially asked for a lot of business and then got hammered. So he does talk about that here, as he has in a couple of other avenues. But in the course of a 90-minute conversation, they were actually able to cover a lot of ground as far as kind of how SGC is going today, where they see certain things going, and a couple of other little behind-the-scenes things that may be interesting to you, as far as also things like, well, how much time did they spend on a card? The answer, without spoiling anything, is it varies a little bit, but for some cards, especially more modern and more common kind of cards that you'll see a lot of, then the amount of time they'll spend on it really isn't as much as you'd think, because a lot of the information, that you need, once you've seen one, you already kind of know what to pick off. So you don't have to spend as much time staring at it to a certain degree, as opposed to maybe an older, more obscure card that you have to do a lot more research on, that you need to learn some nuances of. So you do get a little bit of behind the scenes of how they approach certain different kinds of things, and cases where they do hold back certain cards on purpose because frankly they're not comfortable giving a grade or fully authenticating it without doing a little additional research. So a little bit of that behind the scenes is given to you in the course of this discussion. So like I said, Peter does a very good job promoting his brand and his product. So from that perspective, if you're interested in some background on it, this is probably a pretty good primer, as good as any. So if you got the time or you want to watch in pieces, I would recommend it to you. Link will be in the description for you. Now this one is a completely different direction. So this is Burt Cat 8, and a collector, very passionate collector. And this is more along the lines of, if you're interested, I always kind of I talk about it on the live stream. It's always very interesting to me that a lot of the newsy type stuff will always tend to be a lot more in the news. It'll be something that people really gravitate towards. But a lot of the collector stuff, I've said it before, we can talk about how much we like collector stuff, but a lot of times that doesn't get promoted very much. So that's kind of why I wanted to include this one, because this one was just from yesterday. But Birdcat 8 here actually is very enthusiastic about a couple of pickups he's got. I've zoomed forward, if you're curious, I've zoomed forward about 7 or 8 minutes. If you move to ahead a little bit, he does have some great pickups before this that he talks about, but there's specifically a grail card that he describes in detail, gives a story of why he's interested in it, what he's been, how rare it is in terms of, and also how much it means to him. So if you're interested in kind of that kind of a story from a collector perspective, this is a great video from that perspective. And I would say if you get a chance, check out the video. It'll be a link in the description to it, and you can give him some kudos. Congratulations on finding a great card. This will be something that'll be particularly of interest to you if you're a fan of football cards, and if you're a fan of Packer football cards, then I think it'll be particularly interesting to you. But again, it'll be more of a story. This is more of a collector centric, giving their passion for the specific item they picked up and why it means a lot to them. So if that's something interesting for you, I'm going to include it here. I just wanted to give it a little bit of a shout out, a little bit of a bump, because like I said, a lot of the collector stuff kind of gets lost in the shuffle between a lot of the news and debate topics that we usually talk about. And I know for a fact Birdcat 8 is a great collector, and he's very passionate, and it shows in this video. You do get a good taste of it. So if you're interested in something like that, a little bit of a change of pace, I'm including that one in this video for your perusal if you want to check out the link. Now this last one is kind of interesting. Again, this one isn't really news, but it is a good kind of an interesting story to kind of remember that regardless of where something sits in the pecking order as far as profile in the hobby, they can still make mistakes. And this isn't really to bash them. It's just to give you an avenue to take a look and to check out. And it was kind of an interesting story that came across my desk. Bobby, who's usually on there with the live stream with me, passed this one along, so I checked it out, and it was interesting. The items themselves are a little bit more obscure, so if you're not too familiar with them, that's fine. But but it is kind of an interesting one. So it pertains this individual here purchasing these cards here shown on the bottom here in Golden Auctions lot. And then it includes a link to it, and I'll show that to you in a second. So this is a 1955 Robert Gould All-Stars. So these cards, again, they're a little bit more obscure. They're kind of these interesting little ones with these little drawings. But what they ended up receiving was actually this kind of weird, either a mix or like, I'm not sure if they're fake or if they're just, mounted onto these weird things, because you can see here, like HP paper and Kodak paper, they were mounted onto these like photographic paper. So I don't know if they're genuine cards that basically got mounted onto these, or if they're reproductions or basically got printed out and then got put into these. I'm really not sure. I think regardless, I believe the allusion to it was that these are not genuine. And what makes it a little bit interesting, obviously, is that obviously Golden is high profile. And at the same time, I'll click over to the other tab here. And this is the item in question. So this lot of 28 cards, including Willie Mays and Ernie Banks, sold for $4,200, including the buyer's premium. So not a cheap set, not a cheap lot. Now, I was taking a look a little bit earlier at some of these pictures. And you can see, and I was trying to make out one of the things that I was looking for specifically, and just to give you a little background, what I was looking for is I was curious. I wanted to make sure that what I was seeing in the Net 54 pictures that were provided matches up. Because you can see here that these are all like, this is on cardboard, and like this one is almost translucent. It's white, but you can see it there in the background. But then obviously the stuff that was on here, when you look at this, you can see that you've got this photographic paper. So obviously, regardless, it doesn't seem to be representative of what this presumably should be. But it's one of those things where, for Golden, they do a lot of high profile, high dollar auctions. But it tells you something. Even somebody who has as much, market relevance as a Ken Golden Auctions, basically they can still make mistakes and things can fall through the cracks. So you do have to do your diligence. And in this case, this person was able to reach out to Golden, and they were able to get a refund set up. There is a little bit more to the story, but I will leave, like I said, I'll leave a link to the auction itself, as well as the Net 54 post if you're curious. If you're interested in kind of the path and the journey this went down. So this is the first post in this whole chain. If you go down to, I think, number 28, I want to say, they give a little bit of an update as far as the refund is concerned. It's kind of interesting, but again, I'm going to leave it open to conjecture. This is a he said, she said thing. It is kind of interesting, but I'll leave it to you if you're curious and you want to read it. It is in Net 54, so it is publicly available there if people want to read it, but I'll leave you a link to this thread so you can go and check it out for yourself. So kind of interesting. Like I said, not really worthy of its own standalone video as far as a news story is concerned, quote unquote. And I wasn't too familiar with the set prior to it, so it's kind of an interesting one. A little bit obscure, like I said, but interesting. The big upshot for me is that nobody is really immune from making mistakes. And more than anything else, it doesn't mean that we expect perfection from these companies. It's just a matter of how they then react once they do make a mistake. Because even going back to Peter Steinberg from SGC, he acknowledged that they made a mistake initially in terms of trying to court the amount of submissions that they tried to receive, and they didn't expect and anticipate that they would get buried in an avalanche of them. But they recovered, they started making adjustments immediately, and they were able to eventually reach the stage where they're at now, where they're able to meet the demand they have. They have enough capacity to be able to handle their demand. Their turnaround times have stayed pretty consistent, to their credit. And even down the road, we'll have to see. As we mentioned earlier, PSA disappointed some folks by not bringing a lower price level with their announcement, but at the same time, if and when they do in the not too distant future, then obviously SGC will have to adapt. And that's why I said in that conversation, they do kind of touch on that as well, because it is something that a lot of people wonder. And they do give a little background on that other video as far as, what are some of the considerations? How and when do they react? And like I said, it's a good behind the scenes curtain insight. And overall, like I said, it's going to be a lot of topics and stories like this. So that's it for this one. More videos coming up on the channel as always. I'm actually waiting on a couple of specific cards to come in because I want to do a little story time with a couple of them and talk through some of the things that I'm working on. Now, I'm going to leave you with a question. That'll be kind of my thought for this video at the very end. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that we're getting some headwinds as far as economics and financials. And I may spend a little time talking about that more in a future video. But what I'm curious about is from your perspective. I'm curious what if anything, you're doing. Have you modified or changed anything? Also, at the same time, today I will say that today has been a very nice day, and I'm actually gonna, as soon as I'm done recording this video and editing and getting it uploaded, I'm actually gonna go outside and take a little bit of a walk and get some fresh air. But I'm curious if a couple of you have started to, head out outside, go and take advantage of the sunshine or the warmer weather, hopefully wherever you are. And maybe you're just not as involved in the hobby in general. So I'm curious if that's maybe a factor for you, in addition to some of the, economics and things that people are concerned about. Are you stepping back a little bit? Are you slowing down? Are you, stopping and pausing and waiting to see what happens? I'm curious what, if anything, anything that's going on has impacted upon you. So I'll leave you with that thought. Like I said, more videos coming up on the channel, live streams, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to keep that going here into the next little while. I know we'll do in the next several weeks. Today, earlier on, I already booked my my VIP tickets as far as the upcoming Toronto Expo for the spring, and so I've got my tickets, and then also I'm going to make my accommodations set up probably before the end of the day. So we're starting to prep into it. We're only about 3 weeks or so away, so that's June 2nd, I think, to the 6th. So that should be coming up. I'll talk about it more as I get a little bit closer to it, so it'll be fun. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.